Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're just waiting for our Facebook to go live, and it looks like our Facebook is live. I'm just going to introduce our participants, and we're going to get started. So welcome, everybody who has joined us from Facebook and everybody who is on our Zoom. Thank you very much for being here. This is a webinar brought to you by the Tourette Association of America. We're very excited to bring you Managing Coprolalia in the Community at School and in College. Before we begin, I'm going to ask everyone to make sure that you stay muted and that your camera stays off through the webinar because we are on a Facebook Live and we are actually recording the webinar. We will be taking questions and we'll be taking questions in the chat. So we appreciate you using the chat, and we're going to do our best to give plenty of time to provide time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. In that note, I'm going to introduce our participants. Dr. Kate Miltz is a professor at Oklahoma State University. She and her son, Caden, who also is a presenter tonight, were part of the TV show Raising Tourette in 2018. Since then, Caden has done Coprolalia, and they've joined us today to share some more of their story and experience. Christos Lianos is currently in his senior year of college. He's a strong self-advocate, and he's planning to work in the field of advocacy for others after finishing graduate school. Dr. Kelly Penter is a professor at Carroll University. Along with her course load, she works to make Carroll University the most inclusive environment possible. She has been a mentor to Christos. And on that note, I'm going to ask Kate to get us started. Thank you very much.
You're muted.
I'm so sorry. Thank you, Caden. It's wonderful to be here. I'm having issues clearly. As we were getting set up for tonight, I said to Wendy, there's nothing quite like talking about swearing. It just adds a little joy to the heart, right? Coprolalia is tricky, tricky, tricky. It's one thing to think something that you shouldn't say, but it's a different ballgame when you have to say it. You are potentially compelled to shout it. Whole different ballgame. And so I'm going to jump right in and just start with the idea of where are you? Where are you and what are you saying? Because when we're in the community, there's a lot of factors to consider. It matters in terms of how you're going to handle the tics and community awareness, as it were. If you're in the grocery store, the park, or places like that, it may not be as big of a deal. If someone responds or confronts you, the person with Tourette can respond with their Tourette ID card, or parent or caregiver can respond on their behalf. We have found in our family, sometimes preparing what we'll say before we leave the house can alleviate some stress. It's very rare that we have to respond to something, but just being prepared helps us leave the family together as a unit to be prepared and be more relaxed. If you're going to church, as one key example, what you say may matter more than the grocery store or the park. Making sure that you're talking to the adults in the area and have the support, in this particular example, of the pastor who will make sure that they are aware and side with you and your family. So communication really is key. Around groups of children, particularly in events where adults can pull their children from the activity, like team sports or something like that, it's important to let everyone involved know. Caden had an example with his homeschool PE class that I think he wanted to share.
So I've had Coprolalia for about 1.5 years, give or take, a couple of months. Yeah. But a couple of months ago, it got worse. I take a home school PE class and regular school is like, no. Yeah. So my Tourette's got worse. My mom came and told my PE class about my Coprolalia. And then the class was that day of class was fine, but then the kids went and told their parents, and then the parents threatened to take the children out. So yeah,
And how did that make you feel, Caden?
horrid.
Here's the thing. When we're in the midst of something, I get so used to hearing it from Caden that I don't think about it anymore. And sometimes it's hard to step aside and think about what somebody else might be hurting. The kids received it really well, received the presentation, received that Caden was having particular challenges, because it went from bad to really, really, really bad very quickly. And so we thought, hey, things were going to be great. But then, of course, you have a conversation with your child after an event and you find out, oh, well, this kid in class is saying all these things. And then, of course, the parents responded, listen, we're not holding anything against those parents. It's a lack of understanding. So we worked with the PE coach to do something different to allow them to support the parents and the students who wanted to withdraw and still support Caden. Coprolalia is not only knowing what you're saying, but knowing what you're going to be triggered by. And one of the things that comes to mind for me on that is the cognitive behavioral intervention for tics. Now, when someone with coprolalia or someone with Tourette in general, we want to remember that we're protected, and I say we because I do have Tourette, we are protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act. But when we're out in the community, who actually cares about that? I mean, we care, but do other community members? Not always, because their ears and their eyes are assailed with these sounds and these words that we find throughout society to be offensive. So CBIT, or like I said, cognitive behavioral intervention for tics, may be beneficial. Now, Caden, what was your experience with CBIT when you first had it? And this was prior to coprolalia.
My experience with CBIT was not very good. It didn't really work for me.
But what happened after your tics for coprolalia got really, really bad and we said, hey, let's talk about the impact on this?
The CBIT training was actually useful a bit. I was able to use it a bit to stop a certain tic that was really not the best.
So when Caden got in for CBIT, it was at the downward slide. It was at the end actually of a self-harming tic, because it takes forever to get into cognitive behavioral intervention therapy. And so he struggled to find the benefit from it. But we're talking 3 years later, and he had these tics that it was a struggle within the family. Are these things that his 9-year-old sister should be hearing? And I said, hey, what can you do about this? And he said, Mom, let me try my CBIT. Let me see what I can do. And it really did. When he stopped and he said, let me put some of this training into action, it was successful for him. Now, holding back tics, it is very, very controversial. Some people do it naturally and some don't. Caden doesn't, for example, with most of his tics, but with his coprolalia, he tries to read the room. No, someone with Tourette should not have to, but we have all had experiences, I'm sure, where people have gotten upset or angry around someone with coprolalia or even another tic. Caden, what happens if you want to drop the F-bomb and use somebody's name in association with it?
In those cases, I either try to muffle it in like my arm or my hand. I try not to say it at all. I try to say it in a different language. Or
So it is
I just try to nix their name altogether.
It's my joy to share with you that my child is multilingual in coprolalia. Boy, hasn't that been an adventure. But the fact of the matter is, when he started experiencing a lot of the coprolalia and the swearing, he said, you know what, there is a way for me to hide it. Not because I'm doing something wrong. I can't control this. I know it's not wrong. We've had this conversation, but so that it's disguised for other people. So I can still shout something out. It's still this nasty thing that I'm saying, but it's disguised. It's been helpful for him. Now, in an educational setting, communication, as it is in many other situations, is absolutely key. Within the family, so that other students who might be in the school or who are coming after the student with coprolalia know that their brother or sister is not getting away with something that they can't do, but simply that this is a lack of control. And if there's a situation where they see it in the school system, that they should be providing support for their brother and sister. Youth ambassadors. Kaden, what's the benefit of a youth ambassador?
People, they're the thing. Words.
Okay.
Benefit of a youth ambassador is they can be the same age as the people that they are talking to. Like, I'm a youth ambassador. I might be presenting to people that are 7, might be presenting to people that are older, but there's a chance I might be presenting to 14, 15-year-olds. Like, yeah, people are going to relate because they like the same age.
And many times it's easier to hear about some of these more intense topics from somebody who is of similar age. Education volunteers are available to support you as parents and caregivers when you're talking with the school system. Education volunteers are trained to advocate on behalf of the person with Tourette and their family to make sure their needs are met. And then that ties right in with the teacher and principal. The teacher and the principal, the faculty, the staff can determine how much communication is needed with families within the school, but the education volunteer very much ties in there. It is very, very important as a student with Tourette to accept themselves. And it's not always easy. This is where CBIT can come into play and be beneficial, but encouraging your student to know, I understand and I support that you cannot control this. And reading that child and knowing the true character of that child can help the student feel confident in their abilities to go in school and be who they are, and knowing that they have the support of family, faculty, and the staff. And in terms of the faculty and staff and family members, listen, I know that it gets hard. Sometimes it grates on the ears. Okay, Kate and I have had these conversations, but the most important thing that we can do is click that ignore button. Stick it to the side. It's not easy, but as a parent, I ignore lots of things that my kids do, not to the detriment of their health, but you know, when they're fighting or squabbling. I ignore things in the classroom. There are things that we just have to ignore to move on and let it go. Kaden, will you please wrap us up talking a little bit about anxiety and coprolalia?
Anxiety and coprolalia, at least in my past, they go together. My anxiety affects my coprolalia badly. And what really happens is when I get stressed, I get anxious because anxiety, and then my coprolalia sets off because when anxiety and when you get stressed, your Tourette sets off, and coprolalia is part of Tourette's, and then I get more stress from coprolalia because I hate swearing, and then it's just a loop and a loop and a loop of just garbage, and it's so annoying.
So when we're talking about the anxiety with the coprolalia, one of the things that we have found, at least within our family, is to treat the anxiety through relaxation techniques. In Caden's case, with medication, though that is not the answer for everyone, and also ways to self-calm on his own to help decrease that, which we have found there is a correlation between his anxiety and his coprolalia, and as his anxiety decreases, so does his coprolalia. At this time, we're going to turn it over to Christos and Kelly for their part of the story.
Hey, my name is Dr. Kelly Pinter. I work at Carroll University, and I am Christos's mentor and his professor. So I'm not an expert. I want to make that really, really clear. I'm not an expert on the topic that we're talking about tonight, but I would say that there are some really important things, I think, when you pick a university or when you're choosing a school for your kid. One of the things, so Carroll University, we're a small liberal arts school in Wisconsin, and basically very small, like 4,000 students. I think we have like 133 faculty. And I think part of that, the fact that it is a small university, was a good choice, I would say, for Christos, because everybody gets to know everybody else, which is really nice. And then one of the things about the school that he attends that I work at is that we have something called a cross-cultural focus, which all students have to take to understand, basically to understand difference and to understand that everybody does not walk in the shoes that we walk in every day, and to kind of see the world from a point of view other than our own. And so in order to graduate, students have to take that class. And I think the fact that, you know, this university like cares about difference and really encourages us to acknowledge that we are all different, whether it's through you know, sexual orientation or gender, or if somebody has Tourette's, right? It's really important, I think, for all the teachers listening tonight to understand that every one of our students is dealing with something. Sometimes it's more obvious than others. And I think in the case that we're talking about tonight, you know, it sometimes can be more obvious than others, but it's really important for teachers to understand what their students are going through and to talk to their students and communicate with them. And I think it's important too, there was a question that we were actually sent earlier that somebody was asking, and I think it's important for teachers in the classroom, if you have other students who are not tolerating their, you know, if a student has Tourette's and is shouting out in class, like it's really important, because all the rest of the class is looking to us to do something and to educate. So we can do that in a very kind way, but it's important that we acknowledge that it's not okay to be intolerant in the classroom. So I just thought that was an important point to bring up. And honestly, I remember the first time I met Christos. So I've been teaching at Carroll, I think it's 4 years now. And I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves me correctly, that he came to the university the same semester I started. So that was kind of unique that both of us were getting our feet wet at the same time. But I remember meeting him in our disability services office, and he was like this little tiny, like he was like a kid, you know, and he was so sweet. And I remember his mother was there, and he was excited for school. But it's cool to see him grow from like a kid to like this adult who's so confident, and I'm so proud of him, you know, to be doing the kind of stuff that he's doing now. He actually ran a convocation at our university where the president of the university came. So again, like having support, having folks really that are there and supportive, I think is important. So it takes a village. Christos actually, I think, made this really easier for me as his teacher. He was super brave, and I know like nobody should feel like they have to talk about if they have a disability and tell the whole class, but I really appreciated his approach where he would get up and he would say, "Hi, my name's Christos, and I have something called Tourette's, and this is what happens, and I like cannot help the fact that I might be shouting stuff out, but I just wanted to let everyone know." And I think the fact that he did that, and the fact that it was a small university, people really quickly like understood that if that was happening during an event or something, to be kind. From what I've seen, people overall have been really understanding, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he communicated really early on. Also, it takes a village because he has an amazing support system. I mean, I've never really seen a student that has the kind of family support that he does. So I think that's important. It's important for universities or any educational institution to have something like diversity, equity, and inclusion, where there is a focus on educating faculty and staff, because as much as, you know, you'd think at a university, folks have PhDs and all that, but let me tell you, a lot of times they really don't understand the students in their classes. So it's important to educate and continue to do that throughout the careers of your faculty and staff as well. And having university support is really important. Let me see. So, the biggest thing though, I think like is empowerment. And that's one of the biggest things that I've seen with Christos, is that he went from kind of a scared kid. I mean, he was outspoken, but he was definitely not who he is now, to this very empowered person that wants to pay it forward and wants to help folks that have gone through what he has. And you know, if you are looking for an educational institution for your kid, I would say like really talk to the people who work there, see if they appreciate difference, if they encourage continual education for their faculty and staff to learn about their students who don't walk in the shoes that they do. And I think it takes a village. So anyway, I know you're not here to listen to me, but I have Christos up right now. So I just wanted to say, here is the amazing Christos.
Thank you, Dr. Pinter. That was amazing. I really appreciate everything you had to say.
It's all
Um,
true.
So
You're
my
the-
name is Christos Lianos. I go by the name Christos. My real name is Apostolos, but I go by the name Christos. I'm currently on my senior year at Carroll University, majoring in criminal justice and a minor in communication. I was accepted to graduate school at Carroll University to get my master's in adult, community, and professional education to work in the advocacy field to help individuals with disabilities. More specifically, what I want to do is teach them to advocate for themselves. I think this is very important because these individuals need to develop the ability to speak up for themselves whenever they feel that they are being discriminated against because of their condition. One thing I want to mention is that I see my condition as an opportunity, and you can use condition to your advantage and as a skill you need to learn, which is advocating for yourself. You can go to the next slide. So many times there are going to be many times when your challenging condition dictate. The reason I say condition is because I don't like to use the word disability. I see, like, if someone uses the word disability, I see that as might see that as he's disabled, he can't do some sort of thing. But a lot of people with Tourette syndrome, can do many things. Like I have Tourette's and I'm in college. I play basketball. I write music. I play the piano. I do a lot of things that are unique things that make me me. I don't let Tourette's define me. So I think it's important to know that even though you have Tourette's, it's not that you shouldn't see yourself as disabled. That's why I like to say the word condition. That's what I wanted to mention. But my goal is to provide the tools to create outstanding, successful individuals for their community. But it's important to know that I did not have this mentality for the majority of my journey. It took me a lot of practice and patience. And to this day, I utilize this mentality for every opportunity that is called for. But please understand, this skill is a work in progress and does not happen overnight. Your society and your professional environment are going to see your challenging condition. I see challenging condition, not disability, as a disadvantage and an obstacle to achieving your goals. My message to you is to use the challenging condition as an advantage and opportunity. Also convince your environment that this condition, this condition does not define you, and you have other unique abilities that you can use to convince people that your Tourette's does not make you disabled, but stronger and more capable of handling formidable situations. But if you want to ask me how I do that, it took me a while to gain that mindset. I still have trouble having that mindset today. But by being assertive and explaining to people that your Tourette's enhances other abilities that most people do not have. For example, I think that growing up with Tourette's provided me the determination needed to finish college and get into graduate school. I didn't let my Tourette's prevent me from achieving my goals. On the contrary, it helped me develop this determination and focus. But all set aside, today I'm going to share with you my experience with Tourette's and specifically Coprolalia. I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome at the age of 9. I first developed Coprolalia when I was transitioning from middle school to high school, and I was screaming obscene words and phrases in the classroom and school setting. And as you can imagine, everyone was in awe in what I was experiencing at the time. And you can see right now, I'm not swearing right now. I'm not swearing because I've lived with it. I've dealt with it, and I know techniques and strategies to help ease tics and know like how to become more assertive and advocate for yourself. But I'm going to explain that later. But the teachers were not expecting a student to be swearing, so it came as a surprise to them. And at times they would get offended and ask me to apologize to the class for doing something I could not control. It got to the point where my tics got so vocal that they had to ask me to leave the classroom, resulting in me in missing classes, and my grades started to drop. I was getting in trouble a lot for example, teachers reporting me and suspending me multiple times for my disruptive behavior. So they thought the best decision for me was to be homeschooled. But it's important to mention that my mother could not homeschool me at the time because she has a full-time job and had to take me to numerous doctor's appointments to find the best pharmacological treatment and psychological support. My dad was also out of the country at the time, so he was not able to be around as much as he would have wanted. So my family and I had to seek out an advocate for an IEP, which is an individualized educational program. I'll say it again, individualized educational program to help accommodate my educational needs. IEPs are very essential for students going through Tourette syndrome because it provides them accommodations and ways to help cope with your condition. Because, for example, I was given extra time on tests, people to take notes from me when I missed class due to vocal tics, preferential seating, taking tests in separate rooms and giving me time to relax and calm my tics whenever they were getting out of hand. But it's important to have accommodations and speak up for your accommodations and fight for your rights. It's very important to fight for your rights, because that's what my mother and my family did for me in middle school. Even though they were hesitant on getting me an IEP and they didn't want to give me an IEP, we convinced them, and we set aside, we needed the IEP to help me graduate and help me get through school. So it's very important to have an IEP if anyone has Tourette's or any kind of disorder. But after middle school is over, and following Dr. Woods' advice, a world-known expert on tic disorders, with whom I had the opportunity to work with and participate in the research program CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, I was admitted to Rogers Memorial Hospital for an outpatient program to help find ways to cope with my coprolalia and OCD. This is an example of where I had to go out of my way to put myself in an uncomfortable situation to overcome my condition. So I decided I can either keep on swearing, keep on doing what I'm doing, but I can choose to put myself in the position where, okay, can I get better? Can I find ways to beat my tics, to face it and help overcome it? So although I was hesitant at the time of going, it turned out for the best, because I was able to overcome my coprolalia and develop coping mechanisms such as exposure therapy and competing responses. These two things are two very important techniques to get exposed to face your fears rather than avoiding them. I think a lot of people deal with the Tourette's I think they avoid facing their fears, like going to public places, going to places that they think they'll tic a lot because they don't want to tic. But I encourage you to face those fears, because if you stay home, if you don't face your fears, if you're put in a situation where you don't want to go, try to push yourself to go, because overall it's going to get worse if you keep yourself isolated, and if you keep yourself away from being in public settings. So as long as you expose yourself to those kinds of things, I think the better you can be at coping with your condition, especially coprolalia. So breathing exercises and competing responses in those public settings are very important. At Rogers, they taught me competing responses, which are strategies to lessen tics. For example, my coping strategies for my coprolalia, so it wouldn't be disruptive and bothersome, would be to take deep breaths. Breathing is essential, very, very essential to coprolalia. Deep breaths in from your nose, like 3 seconds in and 3 seconds out from your mouth. The key thing here is the focus. To take the focus away from your tics, because if you take the focus away, and by having the Zen feeling when you're in Zen mode, and like you feel like you can calm yourself down and find the way to find the time and place to have the time to breathe. I think that's important. But overall, I feel lucky, blessed, and grateful that Carroll University and the Walter Young Center for Students with Disabilities honored the accommodations established while in high school and supported me during my college endeavors, because whatever I learned at Rogers in combination with my accommodations helped me cope with my condition in the college setting. And without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. So just to conclude, the use of breathing techniques in combination with the use of tongue muscles to block vocal tics, such as swearing, like if you want to say the F word, for example, like the F swear word, you can use different words instead. Like let's say fudge or fake, or the S word, shit. You could say, or you could say the B word. You could say beach, and try to find ways to, like Caden was saying earlier, different language for your tic. So you would let the tic out, but in a different way, which I think is very important and helps a lot. But I also have this device right here. It is called a steno mask. I call it a muffler or a silencer. I use this mask in public settings to muffle my vocal tics whenever entering a public situation where it can be extremely useful and it can be bothersome to other people, because I feel like if you go into a public place and you start screaming swears, obviously someone's going to say something, you can't avoid it, so you can either make a decision to, get your steno mask, swear in this instead of swearing out loud, muffle the tics so you won't be bothersome. But I know you can't control it, but at least at the end of the day, you're making the decision to help yourself, but as well as help others understand your disability, or your condition. So, but whatever someone might say to you, at least you're doing something about it while not doing nothing and sitting around doing nothing. You're at least doing something about it. But overall, it's important to remember that your tics are not going to be so hard to manage the rest of your life. Tics do get better. I want to emphasize that. I've struggled a lot facing Tourette's, but when I got into college after high school, my tics started getting better and they started going away, but they weren't going fully away. I would have times where I'd swear, I'd have vocal tics and motor tics, but they're not going to be hard to manage for the rest of your life. You'll learn the ability to manage it yourself, whether you have it whether you grow up with it, whether you were diagnosed at a young age, you'll deal with it because it's a part of you. But it does not define you. There's so many other things that people with Tourette's have that does not make you you. I'm not my Tourette's. Tourette's isn't me. I have Tourette's, but I don't let that disability define me, which I think is very important. And I want to end off, sorry, I'm talking a lot. I apologize, Wendy, if I spoke too long. But once you have the confidence and courage to speak up for yourself and manage your tics, you ultimately become a much happier individual. I own my coprolalia. I own my Tourette's. I don't let Tourette's own me. I don't let it control me. I control it. I know that sounds contradictory because you can't control Tourette's, but Tourette syndrome, it is what it is. It's a disability. You can say it's a condition, but whether it's up to you to decide what you do with that condition. It's up to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christos. Thank you, everyone, for being on. Right now, we would really very much like to take questions. And from anybody who has them, we do have a few questions that came in ahead of time. And I'm going to just start with one that somebody had asked me, Christos. Somebody asked where you could get a steno mask.
So a steno mask, they're used in a law, what do you call it? In a courtroom for like recording, whenever you record like what people say, it's actually has like a plug, you plug it in a computer, but that's not what it's for Tourette's. This is just something that one of our counselors in high school recommended that I use in my class settings. But you can order it from Amazon. All you got to do is type in steno mask. It's not a lot of money. You just put it in your mouth. It muffles it very well. You can barely hear your tic. I mean, I know it might sound like kind of like you don't want to do it, but it helps a lot because it helped me in many situations, like when I'm in a movie theater or an airplane or in a public setting and people are around. Having this to muffle my tics helps a lot. So I really recommend it.
Thank you, Christos. If I could ask you, everyone who isn't a speaker or presenter, to make sure that your camera is off, please, and that you remain muted. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I'm going to take another question that came in ahead of time. And somebody asked, how do I tell my parents about coprolalia? Christos, if you would start that, maybe.
So when I was diagnosed with coprolalia, it came out of nowhere. I came home one day and I was a stressful day at school and I just started screaming the F-bomb, screaming the B word, going off and crazy, going ham. And my mom was in awe, but she also knew what it was and she could tell because and so did my stepdad and my stepbrother. And they knew what was going on. They kind of figured it was my Tourette's. So basically, I was grateful to have parents that understand, but to advocate for me. But if you have parents that don't understand, I mean, that's hard. But to have parents that can help you through that period of time in your life where you're swearing, maybe try to work with them and tell them, I don't want this. This is not what I don't mean to do. This is not what I intend. But if you can help me to find ways to handle it, because that's what I did. First thing I did after I started swearing, I went to my school in middle school and spoke to each one of my classes. It took a lot of guts and courage, but it was the first time I ever went out of my way to talk with my Tourette's and started swearing. I was in middle school in 8th grade, where it was the day after my counselor saw me and I was swearing, and she introduced me to the class, and they said to me, and I told them, this is what it is, I'm swearing. And they were all, you could imagine having a student who's in 8th grade screaming the F-bomb and screaming big boobies or something like, I don't know what you want to call it, but like, it came to them as a surprise, which is understandable. But then they understood, but like then it took them a while to fully understand what it is, all my students and classmates, because they haven't dealt with something like this before. It's new to them. It was new to me as well. So I think it's important to know that it's new, and it's if it's new to somebody, they're not going to understand right away. It takes time to better understand what the person with coprolalia is going through.
Thank you very much, Christos. I appreciate that.
Wendy, can I speak to that for just a second?
Yes, please.
And Caden, if there's something you want to absolutely target, let me know, please. Caden developed coprolalia at the end of camp. So we went to pick him up. We were at closing ceremonies, and one of his mentors from camp said, hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. Caden has developed coprolalia. Now, unfortunately, I am in complete and total control of my faculties. I can't blame my swearing on Tourette's because I know when it's coming and I use it quite purposefully. One of the things that I have found when explaining what to do with the coprolalia is when we look to the character of the child, you can see a discernible difference between a child who is pushing the limits and swearing and experimenting with what they can get away with versus a coprolalia type of swearing. And Caden did not ever do much. Swearing has always bothered him. But he tried, I think it was asshole and shit one day. I'm just going to be completely straight with you. And this was just trying to check and see what he can do. And there's a definite difference in a child and how they speak and their rhythm of speaking and how the words come out, even if they're shouting, when it's a tick versus when it is something that they can control.
Thank you, Kate, very much for that answer. I have another. Oh yeah.
One more thing that I think is important to mention about that. I think you had a great point to make, Kate. But being taught by Dr. Woods, who about computer responses, is very knowing to computer responses, like finding ways to block the tick, is very essential, because without it, it taught me ways to manage my coprolalia and deal with it. You don't see me swearing because I've dealt with it for so long, and I've just gotten used to it. But managing coprolalia, it starts with competing responses. He recommended Dr. Woods. I don't know if you know him. He's a professional at about tick disorders. He's the one that recommended me to Rogers Memorial. And they taught me computing responses as the first thing that I was taught with my coprolalia, computing responses. If you want to look that up, they have a lot of research about it, and it helps a lot of research about how it works, the mechanisms, and it helps a lot if you're ever going to some place, public setting. But and it's important to mention that you can tell if someone says you're doing it on purpose, you're taking on purpose, you're not doing that to take, you're doing it on purpose. Like, just know that you can tell if someone is swearing on purpose or swearing for a tick. Like what Kate was saying, you know, like there's like that, there's stress in there, there's anxiety, there's so much that incorporates with it, that goes into the coprolalia, that you can tell whether if you're, this kid actually has Tourette syndrome, or this kid is just bullshitting us and he just wants to make an attention. You know, there is a difference. But as long as if someone says you're doing it on purpose, just tell them that, you know, I'm not doing this on purpose, this is real. Show them your ID. First thing you gotta do is show them your ID, tell them what it is, and I advocate and speak up for it. That's what you gotta do, because that's what I've done for my whole life. And if they don't understand, screw them, because they're not gonna matter for the rest of your life. It's just one person. But if someone says to you, you're doing this on purpose, stop it, you should do something about it, then tell them, you know, I'm sorry, this is what it is, this is how I deal with it. You have the strategies to deal with it. And as long as you do those strategies, as long as you do those mechanisms, that those support, those techniques, and at the end of the day, if you feel like you've controlled it, if you've done your best you could to deal with it, then you should be happy with yourself. You should not be disappointed. You should not feel discouraged, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Christos. Kate, maybe you and Kaden can start this one. Somebody asked, how do you explain it to children?
Kaden, do you want to start that one?
No.
Well, really quick before I give my spiel, how have you explained it to kids, Kaden?
I have Tourette's. It's a neurological disorder. Well, technically neurodevelopmental disorder. I'm just going to say neurological since it's easier. Neurological disorder that makes me do things, say things. I can't control it. I'm sorry.
So just being forthright and honest tends to be the best that we've experienced with children. Recognizing that it is a stressor to the children that are hearing it, and recognizing again that it's a stressor to the person that is experiencing it. And I think Kelly made a good point in her portion of the presentation, talking about making sure that the students in the classroom or children in this particular case know that this judgment and Kelly, you phrased it so much better, but we're not going to allow this within the classroom. Maybe it makes us uncomfortable, but we need to be compassionate. We need to be understanding. This is like not being able to hold back a sneeze, or the way that Kate and I tend to express it is like holding back a blink.
You can't not blink. It's physically impossible. Unless you want to keep your eyes open with one of those devices that they have to do ocular surgery with at the optometrist.
Yes. So with that said, letting the child know that it just doesn't work that easily. And then letting brothers and sisters know, listen, this doesn't sound good. These are mean things that we've taught you not to say, but it's a challenge. And for as much as it hurts for you to hear it, it hurts even more for the person who is saying.
Thank you, Kate and Christos. I appreciate that. This one.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead,
I was
please.
just gonna say, as I'm listening to everyone, you know, I teach my kids about like race and inequality and gender and sexual orientation, and like as soon as I'm done with this, I'm gonna talk to them about Tourette's, because in all honesty, I don't think it should be on the folks who have it, and I understand that that's normally like how the conversation goes, but I think everybody else in society really should be teaching their kids to like how to be decent individuals, you know what I mean?
That's a great point. Thank you, Dr. Pinter. Here is another question. And I think this goes along with a lot of things that we've asked, but it might be specific. How do I tell an adult that doesn't understand that I can't control it? And, you know, we've already kind of brought that up a lot, but I think a specific answer might be helpful too.
I think the best thing in this situation is to have somebody who you trust be with you when you explain this. If you are talking to a teacher, a parent, a grandparent, a college professor, it helps to have that other independent third party person, and we can resource you through the Tourette Association, through the Education Advisory Board. There's all sorts of people that we can put you in contact with, youth ambassadors. We can set things up via Zoom. And when things go back to no masks, then, if we need to do it in person, there are options. Have somebody who is not related to you be that advocate. It is extremely difficult sometimes to have these conversations. And unfortunately, we do hear, mom's just making an excuse for the kid, or so-and-so's just making an excuse because they just don't want to deal with it. No, that's not the case. And we know that. So having an independent third party who's been associated with the Tourette Association, or somebody else who has Tourette, like Christos or like Caden, to say, hey, no, and here's the research to back it up. And this isn't a joke, and we're not screwing around with it, but have that resource and reach out for help if you need it.
I agree, Kate. That was very good. Because personally, if I tell an adult that I'm swearing, and if I'm in a public situation where I'm like at I don't know what's called a brewer game, if you want to give an example, and there's a bunch of people there, and you start swearing, and someone says something, and there's a kid involved, a little kid who's little and doesn't want to hear swears, then you're in a bad situation. Yeah, you don't know what to do, because. But if you have someone with you that can be your, like, I don't want to say guardian angel, but like can be like that knows you very well, he's been with you, you can trust him. So I have many people like that in my life. My Greek church that I go to have many family friends and best friends that know me very well. If they're with you and they can explain to the person that this is what it is, I think they'll believe that more than if you do it saying it's like it's a joke, and it's not a joke, but I think they'll believe more if someone from a different point of view tells it, because they've experienced it themselves as well, so.
Thank you, Christos, and everyone for that great information. I have another question. We have time for a few more questions. I just want to say before I read the next question that I did put some resources in the chat, and there also is a survey in the chat. So before you get off today, if you wouldn't mind doing that for us, please. It gives us information for our future webinars. It helps to kind of help us know what to bring to you and how to bring that to you. From the Tourette Association, so I appreciate that as well. Another question that I have here is, how can my caregiver cope with coprolalia? Even with education, it can be very embarrassing in public.
I'm just going to jump on this one because it is not easy to hear your 14-year-old son, or whatever, in my case, 14-year-old son, drop the F-bomb out in public and swear at me. It's also similar to when my daughter has a hitting tic and she hauls off and just whaps me time and time again, and people look at me like, can you please control your child? And one of the things that I have found is, even though it's not easy, I need to remind myself, sometimes on purpose, this child cannot control it. Insofar as I can ask myself to stop blinking for that period of time that I can stop blinking, I can ask that child to stop. I need to pull my big girl panties on and get over it. And at that point, if it's a matter of getting over myself. It's uncomfortable, but guess what? It's even more uncomfortable for the person that is doing it. And in Caden's case, and I assume this is similar in other cases, possibly in Christos's case, but I mean, it literally just wrecks his heart to say these things. And so get up, get on over yourself.
There's a really awesome question on here that I think Christos could answer because we actually had can I read one?
Absolutely.
It's from Kate. As this is so helpful when you are in the situation regularly, you can have this conversation. We are about to have a conversation with our police department, the resource officer at our high school. We are very worried about what might happen just out in the world. Have these young men ever had a situation with the police? Christos, you kind of have. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but if you want to, I guess you could speak to that one.
I would love to, Dr. Pinter. So I had an internship with the police department, police patrol for for Waukesha. So me, my advisor, Dr. Pinter, and another professor at Carroll, Dr. Hawk, worked with the sheriff at the police department, and I had to go on ride-alongs, for example, for the internship. And so I was with the police patrol officer, and I was there taking, swearing, doing my Coprolalia stuff because I was nervous. We had a high-speed chase. I was anxious as hell. You know, like, of course you would be. Who else wouldn't be if you're going 130 miles per hour in a high-speed chase? So then we arrested the dude, and he was in the back, and he's heard me, the person that was arrested heard me swearing and heard me saying all this kind of stuff. So basically what happened was they thought I was a liability to their department. They thought my Coprolalia was a liability. They said that it's not a great decision for you to have an internship here, and you should try something else. But it didn't work out the way we wanted it to. But that, again, that goes back to what Kate said. As long as you tell them what's going on, and these are police departments, which is really rare for, I mean, I don't know if it's rare for a police department not to understand this disability. I don't think there is much awareness for disabilities out there for police departments. I don't know if that's true, Dr. Pinter.
I agree. Yeah. And when I tried to talk to that officer and explain to him, you know, that you couldn't help that. And it was really interesting because there's such a power dynamic. And he was kind of like, well, you know, I'm in charge was kind of the response. And I was just, he wasn't hearing me. And I don't like the way it turned out, but ultimately then we can look at the bright side where I kind of like the way it turned out, because then you tell them what you ended up doing instead.
Instead, I did the convocation at Carroll as to speak up about my Tourette's. We even thought about inviting the sheriff to the convocation, but instead of doing an internship, I did a convocation at Carroll about speaking about my Tourette's and my Coprolalia with a bunch of other people, and a great outcome. But yeah, if you deal with law enforcement, that's another situation. Like, you gotta, if someone's, I would say, like, if someone stops you, if you're running a speeding light, and if you have, and you start swearing in front of a cop, I've dealt with that before with friends, like when someone is speeding, if your friend is speeding and a cop stops you, or if you have something with you and you're there swearing and the cop is there, like, that's a situation where it's hard to give you a straight answer, but make sure you explain to the officer what's going on and show them first thing you got to do. The first thing that comes to your head, tell them what's going on. You don't want things to escalate. What happened with a lot of situations with police brutality and a lot of discrimination with police and how the police force and how they, you know, shot unarmed people for doing stupid things, you know. Like, and that could have happened with someone with Tourette's. Someone could have a tic, and the police officer might say something or might do something, but, you know, you got to, that it needs more awareness. It needs a lot more awareness for the police department, I believe.
Thank you, Christos. Thank you, everyone, for answering that important question. I'm conscientious of the time that we have 5 minutes left. So I'm hoping that we can get one more kind of question in that came. This one is, how do you suppress it? It's so hard, especially in class. I'm not around good people in class. So I think maybe just addressing, you know, that particular question would be really helpful before we end today.
Of course. So when you have a tick, if you want to swear, say the F word or the B word, you gotta find the middle ground you gotta offer something. You gotta have that in between like understanding. Like, I swear I do this, but I'm also gonna help my tics by using my muffler or my coping strategies for my swears. Or if you need to take 5 to 10 minutes, I have accommodations, which I'm very grateful for, and that helped me a lot in Carroll and through high school, that I can take breaks in class when my tics are escalated, and take breaks to let my tics out if I have to. But using the muffler is important, especially in that situation. It's helped me in high school, helped me in many in church, especially in church. But it's helped me in many situations. So I think using the steno mask and using your coping mechanisms that I've learned, or if you can learn, if you have the chance to learn, and the use in the tongue is important. Like, if you put your tongue on top of your mouth like this, there's a way to block that swear. You know, if you're going like fuck, you know, you can go like this, you know, to cover your mouth, or, you know, but try to suppress it. And I know it's hard. You don't want to do it. It sucks. It's terrible. Trust me, I've been there. But if the teacher understands, and if you both have that middle ground, both understanding that, okay, this I swore, and if you swear at the end of the day, you swore it. You did it. You can't help it. You know, you shouldn't feel ashamed that you did it. But as long as you tried your best to advocate and tell the teacher and the students that this is what it is, I can't help this more than I can't help a sneeze or a cough, then you've done your best. So you shouldn't feel any shame.
I don't think it should be on the student. I mean, I think it's great that you feel like you know that you're going to help the teacher out, but in that case, I really think it's on the teacher if the students are not being respectful to a student. In this case, I think the teacher really needs to like shut down any kind of picking on a student who has Tourette's. Those kids are looking to that teacher, and if that teacher allows that kind of behavior to continue to happen, that kid's going to keep getting picked on. And so I think it's almost more on them. And if the teacher's not doing something about it, I would even suggest that parents go higher up above the teacher's head and talk to like a dean or something like that, because that's unacceptable. And that teacher's behavior sets like precedent for what's going to happen in that class the rest of the semester. So it's really important that they make it clear that it's not okay to allow the kids in the class to pick on someone because of Tourette's. That's my opinion.
Thank you for that, Dr. Pinter. I think that also applies to school, to elementary, middle school, and high school. I appreciate that. Thank you. I guess before we go, somebody did ask, people are asking about something to carry around, and I just want to say, I put it in the comments, we do have resources. We have cards that are printable at the Tourette Association, and we do have hard copies of those cards. I did put support at tourette.org several times as a place where you can reach out, and we can mail resources to you as well. Our survey for this webinar is in the chat. If you would please take the time at the end of this webinar to answer and fill out the survey as well. Somebody asked if this will be available as a recording, and yes, we did record the webinar. We really appreciate our presenters today. They have been amazing. Dr. Kate Miltz, Dr. Kelly Pinter, Christos, and Kaden, thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable and just, you know, being here for our community. I appreciate you a lot. Thank you again. And to everybody who attended, we all appreciate your attendance, and we hope that that you found this helpful. Thank you. It's a very important topic. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you.